It's one of the most heated battles humanity has ever fought, a war without bullets, without borders, without generals, yet more destructive than any army in history. A war that toppled empires, rewired economies, reshaped nations, and split the earth into rival camps for nearly a century. It is the fight between capitalism and socialism, but not the oversimplified version preached in political rallies or shouted in comment sections. This is the real story, the one buried under propaganda, forgotten by textbooks, and ignored by modern influencers who want easy answers to impossible questions. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Neither system worked the way its believers promised, and every time the pressure rose. Famine, war, depression, corruption, the truth surfaced with brutal clarity. Welcome to the Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing turns out the way you expect. Before capitalism or socialism existed, human economies were defined by something far older and far harsher: hierarchy. For most of human history, the economy wasn't an economy, it was survival. Kings controlled land. Landlords controlled peasants. Taxes flowed upward. Destinies were predetermined. Innovation was rare. Social mobility was almost zero. If you were born a peasant, you died a peasant. If your father shined the boots of a noble, you would shine the boots of a noble. Wealth came from land, conquest, and hereditary privilege, not from creativity or productivity. The idea that ordinary people could become wealthy would have sounded like madness. Then everything changed. The Industrial Revolution arrived not like a gentle tide, but like an earthquake ripping the foundation of human society apart. Britain in the late 1700s was a furnace of coal, iron, machines, steam engines, capital, and restless ambition. Suddenly, work was not tied to the soil, it was tied to machines. Productivity exploded. Factories roared to life. Entire cities ballooned in months, swelling with people desperate to escape rural poverty. Capitalism wasn't invented. It emerged naturally from this explosion of industrial possibility. It was messy, terrifying, chaotic, and unimaginably powerful. For the first time ever, people could build, invest, risk, manufacture, scale, and earn outside the control of kings. Wealth stopped being a zero-sum game. Prosperity could grow, but so could suffering. With no safety laws, no minimum wage, no labor rights, capitalism became a brutal arena. Children worked 12 to 14-hour days in filthy factories. Workers lived in cramped, disease-ridden slums. Pollution blackened entire cities. The rich grew richer while the poor lived one accident away from starvation. And it was inside this harsh industrial world that socialism was born. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels didn't write their ideas from ivory towers. They walked the slums of Manchester, witnessing misery on a scale Europe had never seen. They saw exploitation, instability, and the ruthless logic of early capitalism, where human beings were treated as disposable cogs in a profit machine. To them, capitalism wasn't a system, it was an extraction engine. Their solution was radical: eliminate private ownership of factories, eliminate profit, eliminate markets, and let workers collectively control production. It sounded fair. It sounded moral. It sounded like the cure to the cruelty of unregulated capitalism. And in an age of suffering, millions embraced the idea. But ideas are easy. Reality is not. The first real test of socialism didn't happen in a classroom. It happened after the 1917 Russian Revolution. The Tsar was overthrown. The empire collapsed. Russia was starving, illiterate, underdeveloped, and torn by war. Lenin inherited a country with no functioning economy. To rebuild it, he nationalized everything: land, farms, factories, banks, mines, and infrastructure. Prices were set by committees. Production was assigned by bureaucrats. Private business became illegal. In theory, this created equality. In practice, it created chaos. Without competition, factories didn't innovate. Without incentives, workers did the bare minimum. Without market prices, the government had no idea what people needed or how much to produce. Shortages followed. Agriculture collapsed. Famine killed millions. Lenin eventually reintroduced tiny amounts of capitalism, small private markets, just to stop the country from dying. But even then, socialism remained attractive to millions around the world. Why? Because capitalism wasn't doing well either. By the early 1900s, capitalism had produced incredible wealth, but also extreme instability. Monopolies dominated industries. Workers were trapped in poverty. Inequality skyrocketed. And then came capitalism's greatest catastrophe, the 1929 stock market crash and the Great Depression. Banks failed, businesses collapsed, unemployment skyrocketed to 25%, and global capitalism fell into freefall. By the 1930s, the world faced an uncomfortable truth. Neither system worked as promised. Socialism promised equality, but delivered shortages and suffering. Capitalism promised prosperity, but delivered collapse. The world stood between two broken ideologies. Then came World War II, the ultimate stress test of both systems. The Soviet Union proved how powerful centralized planning could be under extreme pressure. It mobilized millions, industrialized rapidly, and produced war materials at astounding speed. Meanwhile, the United States proved how capitalism, when coordinated by government, could outproduce every nation on Earth. The U.S. didn't defeat the Axis with ideology. It defeated them with industrial power. After the war, the world became a giant economic laboratory. On one side, the communist bloc, the USSR, Eastern Europe, China, North Korea, Cuba. On the other, the capitalist West, the US, Western Europe, Japan. This was the real experiment, not the theories. The results were dramatic. The Soviet Union industrialized quickly and achieved early successes. Literacy soared, housing expanded, women entered the workforce, and the country became a military superpower. But its economic system was rotting from within. Factories met quotas by producing unusable goods. Store shelves were empty. Consumer technology lagged decades behind the West. Corruption became normal as party elites lived far better than everyone else. Meanwhile, capitalism evolved. Instead of staying laissez-faire, it invented guardrails, social security, public health care, unemployment insurance, deposit insurance, minimum wages, antitrust laws, and labor protections. These reforms softened capitalism's worst failures while preserving its greatest strength, innovation. By the 1970s, capitalist economies, despite recessions, were far more dynamic than the Soviet system. Capitalism wasn't fair, but it adapted. Socialism wasn't flexible, and it cracked. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Not because capitalism was perfect, but because socialism refused to evolve. Yet capitalism's victory was short-lived. By the 1990s and early 2000s, capitalism transformed again, this time into global financial capitalism. Factories moved overseas. Corporations became multinational giants. Debt exploded. Speculation soared. Inequality surged to levels unseen since the 1800s. And then in 2008, capitalism suffered its second major heart attack, the global financial crisis, caused by unregulated finance and reckless speculation. Younger generations began questioning capitalism again, leading to a revival of socialist ideas, not Soviet-style socialism, but social democracy, wealth taxes, universal health care, and stronger unions. Meanwhile, China showed the world a completely different model, authoritarian capitalism. The government directed strategic industries. Markets were allowed but controlled. Private companies thrived but were monitored. And the result was the fastest economic rise in human history, lifting 800 million people out of poverty in 40 years. Today, every successful country uses a mix of systems. Scandinavia runs capitalism with heavy social protections. Western Europe uses regulated capitalism with safety nets. The United States uses competitive capitalism with weaker protections. China uses market incentives with strict state control. Even modern socialist-leaning nations rely on markets. And when you analyze every system, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Pure capitalism destabilizes, pure socialism stagnates, and hybrids outperform them both. Because capitalism unleashes creativity, innovation, risk-taking, and markets, but also inequality, volatility, and exploitation. Socialism protects people, reduces poverty, builds stability, but also kills incentives, smothers innovation, and concentrates power in the state. Human nature doesn't disappear under any system. Greed exists under capitalism and socialism. Corruption exists under markets and under planning. Power accumulates in corporations or in party elites. The real question isn't which one is good. The real question is which system corrects its mistakes faster. And history gives a clear answer. The system that adapts wins. Capitalism survived because it reinvented itself over and over, from industrial capitalism to progressive-era capitalism, to New Deal capitalism, to globalized capitalism, to digital capitalism. Socialism failed where it refused to evolve. The USSR, Maoist China, North Korea, and succeeded only where it merged with markets. Scandinavia, Vietnam, post-1978 China. The future won't be capitalist or socialist, it will be hybrid. Because the challenges of our century, AI, automation, global inequality, climate instability, demographic decline, cannot be solved by ideology. They require adaptability. Markets for innovation, government for stability, incentives for progress, guardrails for fairness. The debate we inherit is not capitalism versus socialism. It is rigidity versus evolution, dogma versus reality, systems versus human nature. And in every era of history, the same winners emerge. The nations willing to mix, match, experiment, and redesign their economies as the world changes. Because economic systems don't shape human nature shapes economic systems. From kings to capitalists, from communes to corporations, the story is the same. Power concentrates, incentives matter, and adaptability determines survival. And the countries that understand that lesson will shape the next 100 years. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe, because history still holds the answers. I'll show you where to look.